In case anybody doesn't know, I'm Chris Kane, and our kind of main topic for today, although we're free to, as you just saw, go off on tangents, is using FileMaker runtimes and XML with XML data updates. So let me see if this blasted thing to play. There we go. So first off, a lot of you probably know this, but let's just recap what exactly FileMaker runtimes are. FileMaker runtime can be created using FileMaker Pro Advanced. It's in the Tools menu under Utilities. And what it does is it allows you to take a file or group of files and turn it into an independent runtime that does not require FileMaker Pro to run. So it creates its own little package that you can zip up and just hand to somebody with a computer and they can run it. They don't have to install FileMaker Pro. There are some shortcomings in FileMaker runtimes as compared to FileMaker Pro, as you would expect. There's no database design features at all. These are only for single user solutions. You can actually host a runtime file, but then in order to open it from the host, you need to have FileMaker Pro, which kind of does away with the whole reason for having a runtime in the first place. So it is meant for single user applications. There are a few kind of nice to haves that are missing, like PDFs. There's no support for PDF, snapshot links, external data sources, Apple events. There's actually the help system doesn't work, and you don't get charts. So there are some caveats. You have to be sure that if you're going to use runtimes, you've taken that into account, and these aren't essential features for the solution you're trying to develop. Also, it's worth noting that FileMaker has called this technology deprecated. They've been very clear that they're not pulling out the rug yet, but what they're saying is they're not putting any more development effort into the runtime functionality, and they're not really making any promises about whether future versions of FileMaker Pro Advanced will still let you make runtimes. That caused a lot of people to be concerned. For myself, I just figure, if I've already made the runtime, well, it's out there. It's not like it's going to stop working. But do be aware, if you're looking at something that's a long-term project and you think you might be wanting to incorporate new features of FileMaker, it might weigh against using a runtime. Because in future versions, you may not be able to put some of the new features of FileMaker into your runtime. Okay. Upsides, and there are quite a few. The first one is no licensors are required. So if you have a case where you're okay with all the stuff on the first slide, it's okay that these are single user, it's okay that they don't have PDF support, etc. Then it's a big upside to be able to give everybody this solution and not have them buy a copy of FileMaker. So for the project that we're going to be talking about, for instance, the project that I did recently, they have over 500 users of this runtime. The licensing cost for that would be astronomical. So, and in fact, I don't even think they qualify for a site license because most of their users are external. So this was a big plus for the project that we're talking about. Easy distribution. Basically, the runtime gets created as a folder that has an executable in it, and that's end of story. There is no installation routine. They don't have to pre-install anything else, so it does make it very easy to distribute. You just wrap it up as a compressed or zip file, send it to the person, they unzip it, and they can run it right away. Still works on Mac and Windows. You do have to create separate runtimes for that. You can create Mac runtimes from a Mac and Windows runtimes from Windows. Incidentally, in the course of this project, we found out you can also create Windows 32-bit runtimes, but you need a 32-bit version of FileMaker to create it. So the runtime is going to mirror the operating system and specs, basically, of FileMaker Pro Advanced. Another upside is you get that familiar look and feel. It still looks and feels like FileMaker. In fact, in working on this project, I often found myself forgetting which application I was in, whether I was in the runtime or in actual FileMaker, because they really look the same. Kept catching myself trying to manage database from inside the runtime. That's how I realized it didn't work.
Quick question, Chris. So the project had no real sharing of data then between the individual users?
There is no sharing of data in between individual users. There's no peer-to-peer.
500 people not sharing. Just interesting.
I'm sorry, say again?
You had 500 people that don't share information?
Right, and we'll talk in the next slide actually about the specs for this, the requirements for this project. They were really unique. So, you know, we haven't done more than, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 runtimes in our entire history. So, you know, most cases, the multi-user thing, the hosting, those are really kind of the key to why we're building a solution in the first place in most cases, right? But it's important to know what a runtime is capable of, you know, what the constraints are and what the possibilities are, because when you do find an opportunity like this, boy, it's a silver bullet, you know. If you find yourself in that strange situation where you've got users that don't have to share data with each other live, like I said, this can really be a silver bullet, right? So it's a rare circumstance, but if you know if you know to watch for it, it can really be the ticket when it's the right avenue. Does that make sense?
Very much so. I actually have an app. You know how I keep track of I told you my Disney collection?
Right.
I could actually, because people don't want to spend like $200 to $300 to buy FileMaker, you know? And I could create a runtime and say, okay, put this on your PC or your Mac.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So just the last thing on the slide, of course, the familiar look and feel kind of goes with this, that you don't have to do a separate development effort to make the runtime. You kind of, you know, you finish your FileMaker solution and then you tell FileMaker Advanced, make this into a runtime, and it just does. So you're not maintaining separate layouts, you're not maintaining separate schema or anything like that. It's just at a certain point you compile it into a runtime. So not a lot of extra development effort, just caveats like we've talked about that you have to think ahead and make sure that you're not trying to build in something that you can't do with a runtime, like sharing or using PDFs and that sort of thing. Okay. I want to pause for a moment. I saw some questions go by, and I think they were questions. There may have been comments. I've got a tiny little window here, so bear with me. Marvin is telling us that you can actually swap the data files between Mac and Windows. That's cool. I had not tried that. You can swap the... Marvin, when you say the .fmpur file, are you talking about the file that you add an extension to? The actual main file?
Yeah, when you create a runtime, you can actually specify the extension. The default is FMPUR, I believe.
Oh, okay. Actually, I thought it was .usr, or is that in an older version that it was .usr? But okay.
I think it's an older file.
You can take the files that actually are the FileMaker files and move them between Windows and Mac?
Just that FMPUR, the data, that's where the data is stored. And if you copy it within the same runtime version between Mac and PC, the thing that's bound to the same key, it will work.
Oh, I did not realize that. That's pretty cool. Okay.
Just to throw something in here for a second, this is back from FileMaker 4 days, I believe. The deal was that you were supposed to bind the runtime on the Mac first and then rebind it on Windows using exactly the same binding key. The binding key is case sensitive. So as long as you did that, you were able to swap the data file back and forth and it would work.
Okay. We're actually going, I'm glad these questions are coming up because I was planning to actually walk through making a runtime so you could see those steps for those of you who haven't seen them. And it sounds like a bunch of us have actually been through it at least once, but yeah, I think that's going to generate a lot of discussion between us about the different options. Okay. We'll get to that in the demo. I only have one or two more slides, and then I really keep the questions coming though. Don't stop because I'm about to run out of slides, and conversation is key. So
here's a question.
Okay. Here's where we talk about the actual project requirements and how we decided to do a runtime. Well, first of all, this client already had a runtime. They had a runtime that was built in FileMaker 5. And just to show you that runtimes can hang on for a long time, all those 500 users were still using this old runtime. They had some challenges with it, though, and one of them was that this runtime held their pricing data. So this is a solution for doing quotes to customers. So it had some item data in it and prices. But what they were doing way back when this runtime was actively being updated is anytime they wanted to make a change to an item or a change to a price, they had to roll out an entirely new runtime because you can't share data in between them. So we might have considered at that point that, hey, we can't do a runtime because you need to share data. But we dug a little deeper. Okay. What we realized was that they don't really need to share data, they need to update their data. So there's pricing data at the home office, and periodically that pricing data needs to be pushed out to all the users. But this isn't a two-way street. It's not users communicating with other users, and it's not users communicating with the home office. It's just that periodically the home office needs to push out some key data to the runtime so that they can get up-to-date pricing and other product details. Okay, so that's where the XML comes in that we're really going to be focused on here. So just to kind of make it through the slide here, we have the estimation and quoting application. That's what it was, and it's a very, very simplified structure. They didn't even want to keep persisting customers. This is just one-off estimation. They very, very rarely have multiple estimates to the same customer. Incidentally, they sell lockers primarily. Lockers and shelving units for like schools and so forth. So it's not like they get just constant repeat business from the same customers. As I said, originally built as a FileMaker 5 runtime, and they haven't had a lot of changes since FileMaker 5 became obsolete, which is how they hung on this long. They do have 500 plus internal and external users. So they have district managers internally that are doing their own quotes for the company. And then they have distributors who are external people who are acting as a distributor for those same goods. There is no common database of customers or estimates. They don't need them all in the same database. They don't need to share estimates back and forth. And then the last thing was the frequent updates to products and pricing. And you notice I've got the question next to it. That's where we might have considered making this a shared application if it were not for this method of updating the runtimes via XML. Okay. So the key to updating with XML is that FileMaker can export XML. Of course, it has its own standard XML schema. You can actually use XSLT. I had to stop to get those letters in the right order, even though I learned it some years ago. But you can use an XSLT style sheet to translate it into another schema, but FileMaker does have a standard schema that it will export by default. And FileMaker can import XML, and here's what's key, is it can import XML from a URL. So whereas a CSV or an Excel file, those sorts of things, they have to have a file path on your hard drive. XML, it can export from an HTTP address. And of course, that URL can be stored in a field right there in the runtime. So, basic moving parts of making this work. First off, we have a one record system table, which is something we do in all our solutions anyway. This is sort of the system-wide preferences, just gets a one record table. In that table, we store the XML export path, which ideally is a path to a networked folder that is web accessible. And then a URL for XML imports, which is an HTTP address for the runtime to go look at to see if there's updates. In that same system record, that one record table, we record the current solution and data version numbers. It's important to note those are two different version numbers because the solution will probably not have as many versions as the data does. And in order to make sure that we're using the right version of the solution and downloading the right version of the data, we need those two numbers. We need a routine to export all the reference tables, anything that needs to be pushed out as an update. Export them all as XML and create a new version and a set of XML files for the runtime users to download. And then we put an on first window in runtime, in the runtime, so that when they open the runtime, it will import just that one record system table, import an update, check the versions, and then if their data, first of all, it checks the system version, or the solution version, and says, are you using a viable copy, to make sure they're not using some super old copy that they shouldn't be using anymore. And then it says, am I on the right version of the data? And if they're not on the right version of the data, it downloads the rest of the tables and updates all its reference tables. So that's just kind of a high-level view of all the big moving parts here. I said I was going to run out of slides, and I lied. Here's another one. So some design decisions that we made. We decided that the master copy that's used by the administrator, that is the person in the home office, is actually going to be the same file that we convert into the runtime. We considered having separate copies, separate files for here's the runtime file we're going to compile, and here's the file that the home office is going to use. We realized they were so similar that it really didn't make sense to have two separate files. So we have one master file that also ends up getting compiled to make the runtimes. We also ended up with multiple versions of the runtime. So we have a Mac version, a PC version, and a PC 32-bit version. But also remember they had internal and external users. And their old runtime, they actually had two completely separate runtime files for that, which made some data migration really fun because they didn't have the same fields and so forth. We decided that rather than making those into two separate files, we would make one file. We would have one file that we turned into two runtimes that use two different file extensions. And then that file, when it's open, checks its own file extension to figure out which way to behave, whether to hide or show certain features and so forth. We also decided to create a separate file for storing versions and the XML files that go with those versions. That's a one-to-many. There's a table of versions, and for each table, there's multiple records in the files table. And we decided to put that in a separate file so that it doesn't end up getting compiled in the runtime and distributed, just because that file would get large. it is important to note here that we do keep a record of every data update, and that'll come into play later as we're going through some of the functionality. You want to be able to roll back your data version. So whenever we publish a version, we also store all the information about that version in its own records, so that if necessary, we can roll back. If we roll out version 10 and find out the data was all screwed up, we can very, very quickly roll back to 9, and then all the runtimes will download all the stuff from version 9 and get back to the last working version of the data. We did create a runtime prep routine. That is just all the various steps you have to do in your file before you can compile it. I will show you that. The exports and update routines with the XML, we decided they were only certain tables. They were the products themselves, which includes pricing, colors, which are another reference table. And there were two or three other smaller reference tables that I won't belabor too much, but really we isolated. There were, out of this whole solution, there were these 2 or 3 tables that really the home office owns. The end user doesn't get to add stuff to it or take stuff away from it or edit it. That data can just be whatever the home office says it ought to be today. And then finally, and this is kind of a side note, we did end up at the very end of the project discovering that at times, kind of ad hoc, they do have the need to pass estimates from one user to another or from a user back to the home office. We ended up dealing with, but it's not something that needs to happen automatic or live. So we set up routines for exporting just a flattened spreadsheet that another user could import. So that made it useful for like distributors to pass an estimate to a district manager, whereas before they would have printed it out, sent it to him, and he would have punched it into his own system. Also, there's some future development planned where they may be having their end users periodically export all their estimates, send them to the home office so they can be compiled and do like marketing research. But again, this was not live data that they need to constantly, you know, see up-to-date information from everybody else's input. Okay. All right, we made it to the last slide. So we've got some show and tell and definitely some Q&A. Does anybody have any questions just before I start this demo?
I'm pretty interested in how you are parsing and dealing with your XML, but I think I can wait until after.
All right, I think I'm confident you'll see that. Okay. Cool. So, first off, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the file itself, just kind of so you kind of get your bearings. This is more from a user standpoint, so that when we start talking about the technical aspects and I talk about, you know, estimates and products and so forth, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. It's a very simple solution. You land on the home screen, which is actually based on the one record system table. You have some navigation buttons up here, which in fact hide for the runtime users. They only show for administrators. So in the runtime, you won't even see any buttons up here. It's just you see all of your estimates in a list. You can filter that list. You can drill down and see an actual estimate, which we'll come back to in a minute, right? So basically, the system is really all about estimates. I can filter, I can add new, I can, you know, drill down to see one. Here's the tools for exporting and importing. If you want to export this found set, this filtered set rather, as a spreadsheet, and if you want to import a spreadsheet that somebody else exported. But it's all about estimates. And that's really important to note that this works because this is a super, super simple solution. Very widespread, you know, used by a lot of people, so very wide in that sense, but the functionality is not very deep. And then also from the home screen, they have a configuration tab where they can put in their own information, their own logo, particularly distributors, because distributors might be using their own logo instead of Penco's logo. By the way, there's my customer's name. We have a utility for importing from the old runtime version, which was a god-awful pain. And then kind of what version am I on? What version is this file on? The data version and the solution version. Okay. And otherwise, there's just some settings for what to automatically put on new estimates. If I were to drill down on an estimate, the estimate has some just kind of basic details. What's the name of the project, some text about it, customer bill to and ship to. You have the actual items themselves. We really put a lot of effort into just making this easy for them to use, which is different from being generally easy to use. They have a lot of, these 500 users, they've been using this kind of rickety old runtime from FileMaker 5 for the longest time. We determined, of course we wanted to make it easier, but we didn't want to make it so different that they'd have to be retrained. So that was kind of a balancing act. But here you have items. You can pick a color. We're making use of popovers, right? So I can pick good old tawny tan here. I can add accessories to this item. That actually brings you up with a filterable list where I can filter to say I'm looking for something so wide, so deep, so tall, particular brands, etc. This list filters, and then I can select what I want. One of them would probably freak out right now and tell me that these accessories don't go together, but we actually started looking at kind of a configurator thing, and their heads nearly exploded, so we stopped. So we just tell this okay, and it puts them in the list, and we're doing kind of a main item, sub-items thing going on. Okay. We have your totals, which is some serious math about margins and freight and taxes and steel surcharges and all that good stuff. Terms that are going to print out. And then, of course, they can print their various documents. Here's your estimate. This is telling me I can't print an estimate because I haven't put in quantities. One moment while I put in completely fictitious quantities. I get some instructions for how to print because that was apparently blowing their minds. But anyway, so there's my estimate. I hit enter, it goes to my printer, or in this case, I'll cancel.
Quick, how did you deal with different taxes for different states and counties?
We actually didn't in this case. That's something, again, this has to do with really a very, very simple solution. Normally in one of our kind of full-blown solutions, we would be concerned about that sort of thing. We would be driving that not just from the state, but from the county level.
Correct.
So we are putting the onus on the user to know their customer's tax rate.
Okay. Could you build that into your one record solution?
Do we build the tax into?
I said could it, and that didn't say did you. Could you?
We couldn't in this case because this is nationwide.
Okay.
This is used by users nationwide. I suppose we could put it in the system preferences and let the user say this is my default tax rate, but it also gets complicated because
across multiple states or counties. Yep.
Right, and besides that, a lot of their customers, not all, but it's a good portion of their customers don't get charged tax because they're schools and things like that.
Yep.
Or nonprofits. So, you'd be taking the tax out as often as you'd be putting it in. So there wasn't like a clear majority of my customers get tax, or a clear majority don't, or a clear majority get this much. It really varies because of the nature of their customers. But yeah, in a more comprehensive multi-user shared hosted solution, we would have been all over that. We would have been like, let's not guess, let's get this right. And in fact, our base solution includes a counties table in part for that reason, because it comes up so often. But in this case, we're putting it back on the user. What's worth noting, by the way, maybe I should, let me see if I can do this quickly. If I can't, I promise I'll jump off it. But here's their FileMaker 5 runtime. I think I can actually open this up at the same time. But if you could see what they were dealing with before, boy, they were they were happy to get anything that doesn't look like it's from the 90s, really. So we kind of got away with some things. We got to keep this really simple. And in fact, this is still opening. Almost there, honest. See all the different files open. I don't know how many of us were around for FileMaker 5 when it was one table, one file, but this case is terrible. See, so they're all button driven, view my current estimates, drill down on an estimate. They didn't have tabs back then, so there's a lot of buttons taking you to what are actually different layouts. So here's my line items, here's the estimate details, data entry, here's my totals page. We turned all of that into basically a nice tabbed interface where they stay put. Just that alone kind of knocked their socks off. So in no uncertain terms, we got away with a lot. This is a very simple solution. They're not looking for the moon. So okay, so that's what the end user sees is pretty much the home screen and estimates. That's really the only places they have to go. They've got the home screen with their list of estimates and their configuration, and they've got their estimates themselves, which are tabbed interface, buttons for printing and so forth. That's pretty much it as far as the end user is concerned. For the home office user or the administrator, they have system settings, and this is where they can put, like for instance, Penco's own information goes in here. The end user doesn't get to mess with that because Penco is Penco. Server path for product files. If we have time, I'll talk about that because it's really cool. We did come up with a way that they can put images with their products, but they actually store them on the web so that they don't have to be updated.
Nice.
Some system-wide settings. They want it, like Penco wants to enforce that every new estimate gets this product, even if the user forgets to add it. Standard estimate terms. These are going to be included on every estimate, whether you want it or not. Penco wants it. User can add, but this has to be on. Likewise with the terms and conditions, these are things Penco wants to ensure on every estimate. Even if the user wants to add some additional stuff of their own, this has to be included. We have this lists, which is where they handle the other reference tables. These two really kind of ironically ended up not being used, but they're still in there in case they ever figure out why they had me build those in the first place. The main one is the colors. They can actually add colors to this list and publish them out as data because they have the RGB for this. Basically, they can enter a new color, throw in the RGB, and that's going to be available in the menu. They can select it, etc. We have a tab for data publication. This is where they, once they've got all their products and everything the way they want them, they can say publish current data, and we'll go through that in more detail. The opportunity to roll this copy back to an old version or to republish an old version. And again, we'll talk about that more. And information about the solution itself. And here's zips of the various runtime versions. See, we have distributor and district manager. Really, the only difference between these two is the file extension. And then we have Windows 32, normal Windows 64, and then Mac. And then the administrators have one more screen, which is their product setup. And this is where they create or modify their product list with the prices, height, width, depth, what brand is it, what group does it belong to, et cetera, et cetera. Here's where we got at least some of the configurator type stuff. We're able to identify some tools for, this product is just simply not compatible with this other product. We went down that road a ways, made some improvements until they just got worn out talking rules. I kept them on as long as they could stand it. And then we have names of files on the web for this product. So on the system settings screens, I've established the web folder where they're putting all their pictures. This is where I can put a path, either a fully qualified path or just the name of the file in the standard path, that they can, so that the user can pull up that image in a web viewer about this particular product. Whew. Okay, so that's the basic, very high-level view of what the file actually does. Is everybody still with me? Any questions, comments? You want to tell me how ugly this is?
How did you find yourself in this scenario where you knew that this was the best solution? Or maybe that's not even the right question, but why did you go this route?
Right, well, like I said, most of the time, sharing is a big part of this. Sharing is a big part of why we make FileMaker solutions. We got our first clue because, of course, they came to us already having a runtime, so we kind of cheated. We already knew they were happy with or had been happy with a runtime in the past. But even so, we were wondering, like, there's at least the pricing data. Everybody has to be up to date, right? So I think that's the key deciding point, really. There were some others, like they don't need PDFs, for instance. And of course the cost of licensing. But I think the big deciding factor is that they don't have any data that has to be live between users. So that's the thing to watch for, I think. Because with this XML method, we can push out data, we just can't share it live between the users, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you've developed procedures where users can share data, just not live, correct?
Right, not live. It's more like, it's just export-import. It's like I can send you a file that you can import into your own runtime version. But it's not automatic.
Sharing between users in that sense. It's not like a central repository that they can query against.
Exactly, exactly. No central repository for the estimates themselves. Right.
So just a quick question. You said that you're sending data back and forth through XML. Did you look into sending data back and forth through FileMaker files at all? Or was that just not even something you were considering?
The thing is, if you want to import from a FileMaker file, you have to download that FileMaker file, right?
Yep.
There's no script step to download a FileMaker file.
I thought you were able to use the insert from URL and have it point to a zip file.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that downloads the zip file. Do you have and then I suppose you would need some sort of send event, or to unzip the file, identify where that file is, where the file is.
For that.
Say again?
From Frank, what you were saying, why not using a file, just a FileMaker file? Is there real advantage to that? Like, why were you just curious, or is there something that maybe I'm not aware of or other people aren't that you would want to do that?
My only reason for asking that is I've done similar stuff where I've had a system run on, for example, a server and then a client and then FileMaker Go, but I was using the same file, and the advantage with that is because it's the same file, you're able to transfer information between copies. If you make changes, you make the changes in one file, and it's automatically updated for all of them.
Mm-hmm. And that's you're talking about sharing out locally, or
That would require connecting to a hosted FileMaker file. Is that correct?
In this case, yes, but I've done the same thing where data was being sent from it was remote users that were basically entering their expenses for the day because they were up north flying surveys. So they would enter their expenses. The file would, for their expenses for the day, zip it up and send it to headquarters, and headquarters would automate opening it every night, and so they had an up-to-date list of expenses.
And it sounds like data traveling in the other direction.
In that case, no, but the flip side of that was proposals were being sent back and forth that way. If they exceeded a certain amount, then it had to be approved by somebody at headquarters before they were allowed to send it to the client. So they were being done the same way.
Okay.
might be a little off track for what you were going with, but did you consider using XML for that?
This was back in FileMaker.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so like XML was not even an option, but that's always been my default. So I was just curious if you had looked at that and you decided, no, XML makes way more sense, or...
Well, in my experience, XML is ridiculously fast. It's faster than any other kind of importing that can be done, as long as you're creating the XSL.
And I think what I especially like about XML, although you're right, it is just really, really fast. But the other thing is I don't have to download and manipulate a file. I can import from XML that's on a web page without ever downloading it to my local hard drive. I don't have to file paths. I don't have to convert it into something else. It's just a basic import step.
I had created a solution. We needed to update from a URL where it was a hosted XML source, and the client wanted to choose what their criteria was essentially. So what I had made for them was they would click a button to say, I want, this date range and this kind of record. And I would create the XSL based on their parameters on the fly using the base64 encode decode from a variable that was passed in as the parameter they entered. And then I would export that and use that file as the XSL to transform the data when I was importing from the URL. If that made sense.
Sort of, yes. Yes.
I can show and tell if you'd like.
Oh, we might want to. Let's see how we're doing for time, though.
Sure.
That's all right. Okay.
Yeah.
I got a quick question from Jeff. He says, how do they place an order once the customer accepts a quote? I hate this part, but they're actually required to print it out and fax it or email it or turn it into a PDF using an outside program, like a print to PDF, and email it. Kills me a little bit, but they're actually inputting the data into like SAP, and they're actually in the process of switching over to another ERP system. So the idea of getting this to go straight into that system.
Any thought
Yeah.
passed on like using an iPad or something and FileMaker Go?
You can actually open either a FileMaker file, of course, or a runtime file as a standalone on an iPad. So you're essentially getting that anyway.
Well, at least
So
because
this
in
will run
FileMaker Go you can do you can save the PDF and send it up.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I do it, so yeah, I've done it several times.
Okay. All right. Well, good points. Let's try and move on. Let's see. Version creation. Yeah. Let's actually walk through turning this file into a runtime. Okay, I do have this local on my desktop. Okay. And this is actually a very, very quick process, but I'm just going to run through it in case first of all, in case there's anyone who hasn't seen it. And second of all, so those of us who have been through it, if you have any comments, see anything that we should make a point of, jump right in. Okay.
My basic comment: how do you just clear out all the data, correct? The Colonials data.
Okay.
All your
I
data.
run a script, and that script is called Runtime Prep. What was that?
I just chuckled. I was going to say get rid of crap. So.
All right. So I run a script, and I'll just step through this real quick. It's not a terribly long script. Okay. I am using the new truncate table command that came with FileMaker 15 that will delete all records in the table. Oh my God, is it fast? And oh my God, is it scary? I can't believe they added this command, but it's pretty awesome. So I'm actually clearing not just the estimate data, because of course I've got some test data in here, and the administrator might have some test data in here. I'm not just clearing the test data, but I'm also clearing out the reference data. I don't need to distribute this as part of the runtime, because the first time they open up the runtime, they're going to download the latest data anyway. So there's no point inflating the size of the zip file I'm distributing. Okay. So first of all, I make sure we're in standalone. I check that the beginning of the file path is file. Otherwise, I just kick out. And this is for a developer, so I don't even show a message. I figure if you're a developer, it's your problem. You can debug and you can see why it's kicking out. Clear all the old test data and the reference data. So just all these tables, notably not the system table, that one record system table. Okay, but we are getting rid of also, we're just basically clearing out all the other tables. Then we go to the home layout, which is based on system, and we make some particular edits. We want to make sure that, for instance, in the system table, we have container fields for all our runtimes. I don't want to distribute a runtime that has containers with runtimes in them, right? Kind of obvious. So clear all those. Reset some serial value for the estimate number. Clear out the personal info that each individual user is going to put in. Get the version numbers. Reset the data version. So this gives me, as a developer who's compiling it, gives me a chance to increment the version number and say that, you know, this is now going to be 4.5 or 4.6 or whatnot. And then I actually show a dialog to remind me to put in the automatic login, because when this is acting as the master copy, we actually have it up on the server, so it has usernames and passwords. But when we distribute it, we just want everybody to automatically log in as a generic user. Okay, so I am going to clear all these tables, reset some stuff in system, and then give the user some reminders. And watch how fast this runs, actually. This truncate thing is freaking awesome. let's see. So I click run. It's already done all the clearing of data. So I can say this is version, I call it version 5. Okay. It says set the default login account to generic and eraser. You now know my super secret automatic login. So generic, eraser, tell us okay. Yes, I know. I'm done. This is ready to be compiled. Any questions? Those kind of quick.
No, I see why you did this. It's lovely.
I'm sorry, I had a little trouble hearing you there. Could you say again?
Yeah, all I said was that was lovely. I see why you did this.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Of course, we did it manually the first few times, and then went, well, this is dumb. You know, might as well write a script for it. Okay, now in order to make a runtime, and this is counterintuitive, even after making several of them, you have to have the file closed to make a runtime of it. So I'm going to close it. I go Tools, Developer Utilities. I have to pick what file I'm going to do this thing to. So I'm going to pick from my desktop, the FMPUG folder. I want this one. Notably, I'm leaving the data versions behind because I don't want those in the runtime. Because we never go to a layout that shows records from that related file, the user never gets asked where the heck that file is. So we're good. So here we are, ProQuote, add. Whether to rename the file, in this case I'm going to rename it to ProQuote Distributor, right? But you can pretty much call it whatever you like. Then in the specify here for the project folder is where am I going to put a folder for this, and I'm going to put it in my FMPUG. Jason, remind me, did we have to make a new folder? No, we didn't. Okay. So we tell this okay. The solution options. These are all the things you can do with, with developer utilities. We want the first one, which is create a runtime solution. There are some other utilities in here that probably don't get used very often, but it's good to know they're here, like remove admin access from these files permanently. Enable kiosk mode, you know, things of that nature. Okay, I'm not really doing much of anything other than just making a runtime. We have to give the runtime a name, which I'm calling ProQuote Distributor. We do have to give it a bind key. We decided on a bind key internally so that if necessary we can uncompile this file. Also, as mentioned earlier, apparently if you have the same binding key, you can move stuff between runtime folders. So I'm going to say, I like the word eraser. The file extension, we actually copied their file extensions from their old runtime. So PDB was the distributor. You can do a closing splash screen, custom image, stuff like that. I turn the delay way down. Okay. Now, 2 to 12. Okay, so I didn't turn it down quite that much. The reason I'm going to, I've made probably, I don't know, easily 3 dozen, gone through this process easily 3 dozen times in the last month, but the reason I'm looking a little bewildered here as I go through it and trying to remember all the steps is these right here. You can save the settings so you can quickly make another runtime without having to re-enter all that crap. The settings also include the path to your file. So what we've been doing when we roll out a new version is just load settings and go. So that's pretty nice. And then I can just click create and you wait for it to happen. Doesn't take too long. Depending on the machine, I've seen this run even faster. I think it's almost done. It's going to take forever just because I said that. Okay, so there you go. Now it's done. Any comments about that process or questions about that process? Okay. So I'm actually going to close, let's see. So there's version creation, and I'm actually going to close FileMaker. In fact, I'll close my other version of FileMaker. Very often have 2 or 3 versions open here. And now from my desktop, FMPUG, this is the folder that got created, and here's the runtime. It's all inside the runtime folder, and there's an executable. A couple comments about this. They didn't really come into play in this project because the size of this zipped up really wasn't that much. I know from past experience with runtimes, and hopefully I'm not saying anything that's terribly out of date, there are a lot of like help in various languages and so forth. And if the size of this runtime folder is a real concern, they'll be distributing it widely over, to people with low bandwidth. There are several files in here that if you're only going to use it in English, for instance, that you can get rid of. I would do that carefully if you decide to. Also, you can use something like Install Shield or InstallerWise to write an installation routine to make this a little more user-friendly. Put a shortcut on the desktop and that sort of thing. Move this into their program files folder or applications folder on the Mac. In this case, it just wasn't a big deal for their users who were used to just unzip the file and open it. So, but I'm going to open this up, and it's opening in its own application. Notice that it's not any of my versions of FileMaker that are installed. Unable to connect and check for data updates. That's awesome. I'll use a real version to actually do that. But yeah, so I'm in. And here's your runtime. It's got a custom menu, still works, right? Just looks the same, right? Any questions so far?
I'll just jump in with a size comment. Generally, what I've seen on it's about 250, around 250 to 300 megs for a runtime, and it'll generally compress down into 55-ish.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's with FileMaker 14. Not a huge actual database.
That's true. Let me see what. So this is an actual runtime. We got properties zipped up. This is, boy, you were right on it. Yeah, about 55 megs. So we could make that smaller, but really, that's not really that much to download an application nowadays. So nobody was complaining. We just left it the way it was. We didn't trim out all the, PDFs from other languages and stuff like that.
Am I misremembering? Is there an app that does that? Or some sort of application you can download that'll strip that out?
I do not know. I've never heard.
Okay.
Yeah, if you find it, that would be great. Because I'm always a little scared to go in and take stuff out of that runtime folder. I'm always sure that I'm going to end up pulling out a file that not only will break stuff, but it won't break stuff until I've given it to 500 people. So.
Hey, Chris?
Marvin is asking, so you don't save settings for this? We do, actually.
Yeah, that got answered later on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we don't walk through that process every time. So, all right.
Chris, has anybody brought up to FileMaker to do just a non-developer, we can pass this file over to them, nobody can do anything but just run it, which would replace runtime, like Bento, something like in the cost of Bento? Was I clear on what I commented?
No, I don't think I could parse that. Try again.
Okay. What I'm meaning is FileMaker themselves. You know how you have to make a runtime with all those damn files, okay? Does FileMaker ever have the idea of just having a program that would just functionally run a FileMaker built file? No need to change layouts. Just add, subtract, data.
Yeah, like a thin client is what people call that when they're doing it.
Yes, that would be a good terminology.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most popular product ideas going on right.
That's been ignored, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I keep hearing rumors, but
yeah,
who knows?
Yeah, I've been hearing rumors for too long to believe them.
But I'm pretty new, so sometimes I occasionally care.
Karen says, do that to FileMaker Pro install. Karen, can you elaborate?
Sorry, I was on mute. In the setup code for the installer, where they allow you to, like, say, pre-enter the serial number, there's settings you can do to change the nature of the installed FileMaker application on the user's drive. So you can set up that DMG file or whatever to preset loading in the serial number, the name, and whatever, and tell it that this person can't create FileMaker files. They can only use existing ones.
Oh, okay, yeah, and I suppose that in combination with custom menus and security settings and all that, really you're creating a thin client, right?
Right,
Yeah.
but you'd still need to buy a full copy of FileMaker for that.
Yeah, that's what we're...
Yeah, I suppose that's probably why FileMaker's not so excited about a thin client.
Yeah, because it doesn't benefit them as much.
We'd want to pay that, right?
I just sent the criteria, just no new databases.
Oh, nice, nice. I've never actually done that automated install thing. I'm probably even calling it the wrong thing. What's the correct terminology for that?
Assisted install.
All right, everybody else on this side is telling me that as well that I should know this. Yeah, assisted install. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
I've never actually
for that.
So.
It's good for do-it-yourself clients, like who they don't have an IT guy. So I make the installer, and each user just double clicks and goes and throws out the installer.
Is there somewhere I can go read up on that?
Karen?
Oh, I didn't hear the first half. Was that a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is there somewhere that I can go and read up on that you'd be able to put into the chat, maybe?
I guess so. Here, let's see. Is there a README inside the DMG? Have to dig through all these languages and find out which one's going to tell us. Upgrade install. No. I'm sure it's online somewhere. I'm looking through the actual DMG to see if they...
But yeah, that's definitely helpful.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Cool.
This makes it nicer if you're in the situation where the client wants to log in from home, so they're going to be installing it on a personal computer at home to use for work, but you'd really rather not be giving away the farm, right? Or whatever the phrase is.
Right. Good point. Yeah. Okay, excellent.
You remember when the install codes had like limited numbers of installs? And the client's developer copy, one of the guys who was later fired took home, and he killed all the installs on it. Because he was the one in charge of everything at the client, and he was an asshole.
Wow.
So I had to ask FileMaker, could you restore our installs, please? Because it was absconded with.
Oh, no. All right.
I do have a question about the troubleshooting.
Go ahead.
So I have a friend of mine who has been trying to manage a hobby out of Excel and naturally doing what I do. I'm like, no, I got this. So I whipped up something together for him and created a runtime, but I couldn't get it to run on his system. I was very intentional. I created it on Windows. Well, that's just how far I got with troubleshooting. But he couldn't open it for some reason, and I never saw an exe that was generated either. So I'm sure I'm doing something wrong, but I just don't know what it is or how to find out.
Our client, or Pinko mentioned something about, I forget it. This is Jason here. Pinko, I think mentioned something about one of their users having some trouble. I think on Windows 10, that it wouldn't run the runtime, and I think we worked out that there were maybe some security problems with Windows 10, not recognizing, the runtime as a kind of a safe application. So.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. This was the old FileMaker 5 runtime, though, right?
This is our new one.
Oh, did they have they had a user that still had the problem with the new one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it was then that at least was just a matter of finding the right settings buried in Windows 10 security to tell it to cut that out and let the application run. But that's probably the only thing I think we've heard of along those lines.
I was reading that some people thought that, well, no, you got to actually generate the executable on the machine you're going to use it on, but that kind of defeats the purpose. So I didn't really,
Yeah.
I thought maybe the issue maybe was that I was creating it on a virtual machine. Can you guys speak on whether that may impact it at all?
It should not. I do that with Windows all the time.
That's what I thought.
It might make a difference 32-bit versus 64-bit, but
well, that was the first thing I checked, and it's 64 creation machine and user machine.
I'm impressed that was the first thing you checked, by the way.
Yeah.
Because it took us a while to figure out that the person who can run.
I'm scarred for life from managing 360 Works email plugin. So.
Yeah, just
our reaction, can we just get that person a new machine? But that almost flew, actually, but no, we had to put out 32-bit versions.
Just a quick question. As far as I know, you can run a 32-bit FileMaker Pro on a 64-bit machine. So just because it's a 64-bit machine doesn't necessarily mean that your copy of FileMaker Pro is 64-bit, and then therefore the runtime may not be.
No, that's an important distinction.
Yeah, we did end up installing we did a 32-bit install on another machine just so that we can make 32-bit runtimes. Even though the machine we installed it on was, of course, a modern machine, 64-bit and everything. But if you install FileMaker as a 32-bit FileMaker, it will make 32-bit runtimes. All right. So does anybody want to see the whole routine for exporting and importing the XML?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to try and get through this part because the discussion's awesome, but I'm afraid we're going to, and it really is awesome, by the way, but I'm afraid at the end you're going to go, Chris never told us what he came here to tell us.
Please.
You'll blame it on me. I know you will. So, let's see. So opening this up, notice it opened as generic because I forgot to hold down the shift key. I've already prepped this file. It's doing an automatic login. I think that's in the steps for how to open with another password. Step 1, open it with the default password, smack yourself in the head, close it, open again with the shift key down. It's just part of the steps.
Won't be the first time and definitely not the last.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because I'll do it next time too. No matter how much I'm laughing, I will still do it again every stinking time. All right, so this routine for publishing current data. I'm actually going to turn on the debugger, but I promise not to belabor every single step. So we say publish current data, and that's going to take the products, the colors, and those other couple of setting tables, and it's going to create new XML files for them. The reason I want to go through this is some of this stuff isn't so much technical as I didn't think of it until I had to do it. And then realized and kind of ended up backtracking a little bit. So I'm hoping from going through this that maybe I'll help you avoid at least one or two pitfalls if you ever decide to do this method yourself. So first of all, of course, just housekeeping. Make sure the user's not going to bail on us. Make sure we can commit, you know. The user, if they've got a note from their mother, do they really know what they're doing here? So we say yes. So this is just explaining we're gonna create new data versions, new version of the data, but this isn't going to mess with their existing estimates or anything like that. So I say yeah, I want to continue on that. Going to run the whole thing in a processing window, just so I don't. So at the end, I can just close that window and go back to wherever the user happened to be. And
spawn a superhero.
Head off to system. And here's where we capture all the original, all the system data, like the version number and so forth, from before we did this. And the reason I'm doing that is because if during the course of this entire process, something goes horribly, horribly wrong, I need to be able to set everything back and say, no, we didn't make it to version 10, we went back to version 9. So I need the new version number actually in the data that I'm publishing in XML. But if I don't manage to publish everything, I need to set the number back to, for instance, 9. So I'm capturing all that in variables. Again, I won't belabor every single point. We get the temporary path of the current machine or the current FileMaker instance. Now, the reason for that is, again, this has to do with being able to roll back. We're going to create these XML files in the temp directory first, make sure I can get everything exported successfully, and then I'll go create the version record and upload the files into the actual FileMaker solution. Okay. Let's see, other considerations. I do have to have an export order for each table, which, God, do I wish I didn't have to, but I do.
Say again, please, Chris.
I have to create an export step for each table.
Yes, that would make perfectly good sense.
Yeah, it would be awfully nice if we could do that programmatically, but we can't.
No.
So, you know, I'm in properties. Here's something that's interesting, or no, I'm not in properties, apparently. I'm in, okay, where the heck am I? It's going to stop on one of these. Oh, I'm on a table that didn't have an export order, and that's how it knows that this is not one I should be publishing. So let me run this to properties. I'm going to run the break. Okay, so now here we are on properties. Notice I have this if, else if. I realized, especially with these settings tables, that they're a little wishy-washy about why they even need them. That there may come a time when I have a table that has an export order, but the administrator has actually deleted every single record from that table. If that were to happen, I can't export and import nothing. So instead what I do is I keep track of the tables that don't have an export, that that have an export order but no records, so that on my import routine, I can check that list, and if there are any tables in that list, I'm going to go just delete all the records in the table. I'm not going to try and import nothing. Okay? So that took me a while to figure out, but maybe I'm just slow. Okay, so then export, and this is just export as XML. And we're using the standard, oh, come now. Did that actually just run? That was fast. Okay, that actually ran even faster than I thought. Anyway, so yeah, it's exporting each one to the temporary directory. It's using the standard XML schema. We're not translating it or anything. FileMaker's schema is just as good as any, probably better than most. So this creates...
Fastest for imports.
I'm sorry?
It's the fastest for imports when you're using XSL to pull something in. All it's trying to do is try and get it in its native export format so that it can pull it in. So if you're exporting it like that, that's the best case scenario for bringing it back into FileMaker.
Yeah, no translation required. It's not like we're trying to interact with some other XML schema. It's basically FileMaker to FileMaker, so just leave it as it is. It's kind of nice. So I'm going to run to break again. All right. And then I actually put myself a shortcut to my temp folder so I didn't have to hunt for it too badly. And I'm looking for my S's. And I'm not finding them. What am I doing wrong? Temp. App data. Local. Temp. S. Oh, they're there. Okay. I just fat fingered it. Okay, this file is not cooperating now. I don't seem to have gotten my help. I don't seem to have gotten my XML files. Boy, there is nothing like a demo. I swear I've done this like 100 times recently, but I go to demonstrate it. Yeah, they're all like PRO, XML, COL, XML. Yeah, let me, well, it's a pretty big folder. Yeah, that says it's S10.31, and yet. Oh, wait a minute. I may have. Well, meanwhile, talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to find this, honest.
So it's pretty nice that you don't have to deal with the translating of the information in XML, because it's pretty, that was the most time-consuming thing I had to do when I was calling on an external XML source. And on top of that, depending if they have documentation or not, sometimes it's actually worse if they have documentation, because you read something go down one way and you're like, no, this doesn't even make sense. Depending on how frequent it is.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to do the Julia Childs thing here, and just sort of show it to you finished. But, all right, so if we run through the script, it's doing all the exports into the temp folder, and then assuming we got that far, it actually creates records in the version file for the version and the various XML files. And I actually have a copy that I did earlier, so we're going to pretend this worked, because I don't know what I've goofed up in my demo. Okay? Well, what you end up with is this kind of group of files. Ideally, as I said, you would map this to a network folder that's web accessible. I actually don't have a network folder here in my office that is web accessible, so instead, what I've done is shortcut to a folder that is web accessible. And on that I have my publish folder. And if you can't manage to, come on. If you can't manage to get mapped to a network accessible folder, then this is the extra step. You have to take the files you created on your desktop or whatever, drag them, drop them, tell it to replace all. Okay, and I've just published a version. Okay.
So just a quick question here, because I'm not familiar with the FileMaker XML export. I mean, I sort of tried something, I never got it working, I just gave up on it. Are you saying that in FileMaker you can choose to export as XML and then go to another FileMaker table and specify that's the XML file I want to import, not have to specify any XSLT, and it actually works?
That's correct, but you have to use the first option. I forget what that is. Shame on me. When you're doing your export, you'll have a choice of two options when you are doing your export, and you want to choose the first one. That's the one that doesn't require any XSLT.
Sorry, you said the first one does or does not require XSLT?
The first one does not. The second one, I believe, is being deprecated. I'm not entirely certain on that. I'll see if I can find a reference right now.
Here, let me show you the actual XML step. That's Frank, right? Asking the question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thought I recognized your voice. Hey, who else is going to DevCon? Just for a distracting tangent here. Anybody?
I won't be.
I hate Vegas.
Oh, I do too. But, you know, if you're going to DevCon, it's just a hotel and an airport anyway, right?
Right.
All right. Yeah, so here, when I specify output file, I specify XML right here. Just tell it OK. And see the grammar, if you leave this as FMP XML result, you don't need to fill out anything else. It's just going to go out in its own standard format or a standard schema. And then what a file like that looks like, I'll pick a smaller one. It looks like so. Pretty standard. Pretty standard, really.
I also found that a lot of the top data for the, like when you're defining your XML, at least for an import, a lot of it doesn't matter. I tried completely arbitrary things, contrary to the documentation, and I deleted some others all in entirety, and you really need a lot less than you think.
Yeah, back when FileMaker was supporting XSLT as kind of their primary web tool, I did learn XSLT, and then as soon as FileMaker stopped supporting it, I forgot everything about it. That was not a fun language to work in. Okay, so that's exporting, and then when you import, cancel. I'm going to close this without saving because I didn't think I changed anything. The import is kind of a reverse of that. So on first window, we checked it. We do that. We update data. So this is running basically on first window in this file. If it recognizes, hey, I'm a runtime, basically. I have one of these file extensions. Then it imports, using the settings in system, it imports just that one system record from sys.xml, this one. This very tiny file. and it checks the version. Did the version just change? If so, download the rest or import all the rest of the files. And the important thing here is you do have to have a different import step because you can't script the mapping itself. And it's specify data source. It's going to be XML. I'm actually using a variable. And then specify your import order in this. Well, you can't see it right now because I don't have path set, but it looks just like the import dialog you're used to, Frank.
Mhm.
And you can still do matching names and so forth.
I can't believe I didn't know this because I thought I've tried this and I just gave up on it because I was getting too frustrated with the XSLT and I thought you had to use that and I just threw it out the window. So
It's kind of understandable you would think that because they kind of hyped up the XSLT, especially in the past, and kind of glossed over the fact that you don't really need that if you're working with FileMaker's own XML.
Oh, this is really good to know.
And what's really cool here, like I said, is that I'm importing from an HTTP address. So there's no download the file, move it to the right folder, try and figure out the path and the directory and all that good stuff. I'm just importing directly from this URL.
Yeah, which makes it extremely versatile.
Yeah, and it gets rid of, 500,000 steps. All the, find the file, download the file, track where the file went, and FileMaker doesn't have a whole lot of file manipulation tools built in. So, actually juggling the file on the hard drive is really pretty rough. Able to import and just leave it up on the web where it is.
Yeah.
Really nice. So. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Do you want to see more detail on any of that stuff, or should we just open it up for conversation? Right.
I had a slightly unrelated question.
I think we're ready for those, judging by the silence. So, what do you have?
I'm just curious about the syntax of if blank, else if. That's
Actually,
been driving me nuts for the last 30 minutes.
Oh, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. It's a little bit weird. Let me see. I'm gonna actually tell you about it, but I'm also gonna get a link to the. Actually, Wayne, could you do me a favor? Find the blog about where I mentioned that. Yeah, it's not naming conventions. It's calculation conventions or
Hints, tips, and tricks. I don't know. Oh.
yeah. Okay. Wayne will find it. I actually have a blog where I explain that. But this if being blank doesn't actually do anything. Okay. So then you're wondering why the heck did I do that? This is actually a good script to demonstrate it in. So imagine I had done
Placeholder.
Imagine I had done this, which is what you would expect.
Yep. Now I understand.
Right? If it's pro, do this. If it's col, do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I decide I want something just like this. I can't duplicate it. Right?
I see. Right.
But if I do it, let's see if the undo works. Oh, yeah, we have undo. If I have it like this, I can just grab these steps, duplicate them, try and remember the keystroke. There we go. Make my edits. So in our if clauses, we so often find that I need a second condition that's very much like the first one. That I just made it a habit to always do a blank if at the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It does look funny.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I started that back in FileMaker 11 or 12. I just got tired of having to duplicate, copy the if, add an else if, paste it in. It's like, this is just happening too often.
Yeah.
For another example of really obsessive, that sort of thing, I guess. I don't even know if I have a word for it, but this is also in the blog. I do when I'm doing a let statement, I'll start my let statement off every single one, or pretty much every single one. I start with x equals 1, and then this equals that, and that equals other thing. Like
Do you
so.
use
And
any text expanders?
I actually care about the x. The x, I never use it, but it's just so that I can copy this condition, paste it here, and I don't have to worry about the blasted semicolon. I don't have to copy and paste if it's the first item in the list, because the first item in the list is a dummy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see the difference is like you're starting with a semicolon in front of everything as opposed.
Yeah, I actually go into it in much more detail in the blog, which Wayne will find and
It's on there.
Oh, Wayne just put it in the chat. Did you?
Yeah, above.
Oh, wow! I haven't scrolled down in a while.
Yeah, and Patrick reposted for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah. So it's just a couple of techniques like that. I mean, they don't change the behavior, but they just make it easier to copy and paste sections of code because so often in the case of a let, a case, if else if, it ends up that you've got to copy and paste a little bit differently if it's the first item or if it's the last item. It's just a technique to stop having to go, oh blast, I forgot about the semicolon, or I forgot about the or I have to make a new else if or something like that. So, did I ramble on about that enough? Did I answer your question?
No, I think I'll start using it.
Oh, I hope you do.
No, thank you.
I'd rather not be the only person in the world, which I might be, even though
because I do that. There's a lot of times where I'm doing something like that, and I go, and we won't put in like Nixon do expletive deleted. So we have to leave out. We can leave out some expletive deleted and say, "Yep, this is very good now."
Anything else? Anybody else?
I was just going to ask back onto the runtime. Are the export and import routines for user sharing data pretty similar, but they're just copying, sort of manually specifying files?
No manual specification.
There's no manual specification. It's all script. Did I miss it?
Okay, so user A exports runs the export routine. Then
that's it. Yeah, that's where I think you're misunderstanding. Only the person in the home office, the keeper of the data, that's one person, only they export. Oh,
products, right. I thought estimates could be shared.
Okay, so the estimates, that's not done with XML.
Okay.
Really, primarily because it serves a dual purpose. So if I'm going to open the one on the server because it still has all the test data in it and so forth. That one doesn't actually use XML because the users actually want to be able to open and read this thing. So that's where, come on, load up. That's where we have the export and import buttons, and that's just using an Excel file.
Okay.
So if I'm a user and I've done all these estimates, I can go export. I don't have to choose files or anything. It just assumes I want the desktop, and we err on the side of too many columns. All right? So here's all my estimates, and they've been flattened out, so I get 1 row per line item. Come on, you can do it. It's more test data than I used to have, so I'm surprised.
Chris,
Yes.
you said you could move a runtime over to iPad or an iPhone. You said that?
You can move the file itself, not the whole runtime. So
The data file, yeah.
yeah. So actually, give me just a second.
FileMaker Go.
Just a second. Let me round up. I
Okay.
think I'm almost as far as the spreadsheet question.
Yep.
Or the export-import for passing. Does that answer the question about the export-import?
Sure. I mean, you could, in theory, use XML, right?
Yeah, it's just this was kind of a mixed requirement. They not only wanted to be able to pass data back and forth, but they also
But
wanted to be able
look at it.
Yeah, and XML is just crap for reading.
Sure.
So, yeah, so we just did that with a simple Excel file, and it's a little more understandable to end users. But as far as the XML file goes, there's only one exporter. Like I said, her name is Jennifer. It really is just one person. Everybody else is a consumer of that data. Okay? So back to the iPad and the runtime.
Mm-hmm.
If you look in this, this is the folder of files that I just created.
Yeah.
The files with the extension that I specified. Remember I said I wanted
Yes,
it to
I remember. Uh-huh.
Yeah, this file is really a FileMaker file with a different extension. The rest of the files in this folder are bound to this folder, to this file, excuse me. Does that make sense? This executable is bound to the FileMaker file and will only run.
FileMaker Pro would actually, in essence, open the ProQuote PDV?
Absolutely. Not even an effect. Yeah. So here, if I go File, Open, and Browse, and I got to take off where it says only FP12 files or whatever.
Yeah.
But then I go into ProQuote Distributor, and I find the .pdv file. This is, again, the extension I specified. Not the executable, right?
I'm sorry, I missed. You had a hiccup. In the volume.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, not the executable. You want to find the file with the extension that you specified.
Yes.
You also want to make sure you close it in your other application. So one moment, browse, all files, find the PDV file. Again, not the executable. I keep wanting to. I grab that PDV file, tell it open, and it opens like a FileMaker file. And gives me the same error that the runtime was giving me fits.
I'm a little confused about so the PDV is what you said that the other files were bound to. Is that including the EXE?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that executable will not run any other FileMaker files. It will only run a PDV.
Okay.
Whereas FileMaker Pro will run any FileMaker file.
And the PDV, that was chosen by you, right?
Yes, I chose the FileMaker. I chose the file extension.
Yep, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, the default is FMPUR, I think. Which I was wrong about earlier. I was remembering back in the old days they used to put USR. But back in FileMaker 5 at least, they used to put .USR, which was a horrible extension.
Have you considered at all what do they call it, the SDK they released to put stuff on the App Store? Have you played with it?
I have not. I think Wayne's done some reading on it.
iOS SDK?
Yeah, the iOS SDK?
Yeah, I know you probably need Xcode to get that going, but
you need that in an Apple developer subscription so you can sign your app.
You did a subscription as well, which is what, like $100 a year or something like that?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Has anyone here, I know none of us have, has here in this room, but has anyone out there built the app with the iOS SDK yet?
I have. That's why I was asking.
Is it awesome? Is it? Can you download it on the App Store and all those things?
Well, so I didn't publish because you still have to follow the same rules as every other person who submits something where it needs reviewed, and that's a fairly arbitrary process from what I've heard from some of the other developers who have actually put something out that wasn't just FileMaker related. So what you can use is the Apple configurator to install it on a device. And if you're in an instance where you have like 10, 15 people in a smaller office, what you can do is set up that profile and the app itself with the Apple configurator, and then just plug in the device, install the blueprint, and then they're good to go, and you just churn and burn them.
Okay.
So you have to make the runtime, but then you have to bind it using Xcode.
Okay. And how bad is that? Is that you have to learn like a lot of Xcode to get that done?
No, you have to learn the user interface. I would say it's no real new knowledge involved on your part, other than what configurations to set.
Okay, that doesn't sound too bad actually.
It's really not. I followed the instructions verbatim and made the thing in one go.
Wow. Good
So
job. You can get those from FileMaker themselves, right? They have like a little PDF or something on it?
Yeah, they issued instructions for that. I have it up right now. Put that in the chat.
Yeah, please, because I'd like to read that again.
Yeah, I mean
I can find a time when we should do this and for a particular application. It just hasn't come up yet.
Well, I think it was not Richard Carlson, maybe it was, and Todd Geis. They were super excited and had a webcast go out when it got released. And the biggest thing that they were saying was that this allows you to create one app, but that app can essentially update itself. You can have a container that will import the new file that is actually ran when you're, I don't know what to call it, the face app or the system app. Let's call it that for lack of a better term. So the system app will make a call out and say, hey, do I have the latest version? And if that's not the case, you get rid of whatever is in the container that actually holds what's being done. You import the new version, and then you can have literally an entire new application, which I'm really surprised that they even let this happen, because if you have to go through the process of getting an application approved, it can be one thing, but then, as soon as that thing gets out in the wild, you can just make it a completely another thing.
Yeah, right? That sounds a little bit scary from their perspective,
Right.
It sounds like a practical joke just waiting to happen.
And I'm surprised it hasn't. But nobody cares enough to do it so far. If you look in the App Store now, there's a couple novel things out there. There's somebody put something out that's keep track of your golf score during a game.
Nice.
Wow. I knew someone had to do it. I hate pencil and paper, so.
Yeah, so yeah, that's out there. It's really easy to do. You got to bite the bullet and take some.
Yeah, I want to learn it. As long as it's not as bad as PHP was, because for me to learn, because that was.
Oh, my word, no! It is. Like I said, you don't have to learn any new skills really. You're just configuring. You have to learn interfaces.
I'm gonna take a look at it. Read the instructions.
And it might actually be a way to get around what you guys were talking about, or dealing with the XML, because if you can just push this out, well, they'd have to have Macs and so on. There's that restriction. But that could be another avenue.
Yeah, it would have been actually if they were entirely Mac. They're primarily PC. They have a few Mac users and a very small handful of users who asked about using it on an iPad. So they were primarily concerned with Windows. But yeah, that would have made life easier.
And even if you didn't publish it on the App Store, you could still just use the configurator for, well, that's specifically for iOS devices, however.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Only iPad and iPhone.
So hey, who else is going to DevCon? Because I'm flying out Monday, and it's just me from our team, so I'm looking for people to hang out with. Anybody else going to be there?
I'm afraid I'm out.
Sorry, man.
Not me.
Oh, darn. Well, then I think our next topic is probably going to end up being news from DevCon, and I'll try and take notes and tell you about it.
Oh, it says Eric from DocuWorks will be there.
Ah, Eric's going to be there. Yeah, that's
Nice.
good. I'm already planning to chase him down. Yeah, look for the New York folk. If they party, they'll be at the same place as I am in the evening, so I'll just be hitting the bar. So. And, another kind of FileMaker newsy question. Anybody else certified in 15 yet? Yeah. Oh, that says nope. I thought you said yes.
Nana said yes.
Yeah, Nana.
Nana said yes? Nana!
Good job, Nana.
Really? Good job. Yeah.
Good job, DocuWorks.
Yeah.
The whole group. We are as well, by the way, our whole group.
Yeah, we all three did it last week, and all three passed. So.
Barely.
Yeah, that's a tough test. We can't talk about it, of course, but
Yeah.
wow.
Wow.
It's definitely not getting easier as the versions go on.
So I gotta ask, this whole certification thing, does it make much of a difference to your clients? Because I've never bothered getting certified in any version.
You know, I could make the case that to our clients that we already have, no, it doesn't make a difference. And of course, word of mouth clients. Where for us, there's a couple ways that I would say certification makes a difference. Probably the same reason that you know, you get a college degree, even if you have the experience, is just so that you can go, look, I know this stuff. Can we talk about specifics? But from a business point, our listing on the FileMaker website shows up higher than those companies that don't have certified developers. So it's kind of a practical thing. Now somebody who's looking for a FileMaker consultant, see us higher in the list. Call us earlier. So.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say your clients, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't know it before you were certified.
I'm sorry. Say that again, please.
It's a great advertising tool. It's kind of proof, you know.
Yeah, so I guess all in all, you guys would say it's worthwhile having it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it gets us more than enough new business to justify the cost and the time involved.
If you're your own company, then yeah, it matters to be able to put that on there, surely from a ranking point of view when searching happens, or.
Yeah, as Karen says, if you're hanging out your shingle, it's kind of a must. If I were an in-house developer and I didn't expect to be looking for a job anytime soon, you know, a nice secure in-house position, I probably wouldn't bother. Frankly, I mean, don't tell anybody at FileMaker.
Yeah, certainly for us, you know, the FBA side is our primary market. You know, we don't really do any kind of outside sales or marketing for example, because you know we stay busy enough. Those inquiries, and we get those inquiries, and you know, we're ranked highly there. Of course, first because of our platinum status, but then they rank every FBA member by the number of developers that they have on staff, on developers. So for us, it's kind of like a few $100 a year to get everybody certified. You know, provided we pass, right? but that's about all we end up having to spend on. So in that regard, it's just a fantastic tool for us. So.
Okay.
It kind of eliminates. You know,
sorry, I was just going to say that I've come across some code from other developers that have been certified, and let's just say the code itself was extremely poorly written. So, to me, certification has never had any meaning.
Yeah, I think you know, obviously, if you're not certified and then you get certified, you didn't suddenly blossom with all this new knowledge, right? You knew it when you were going into the test, otherwise you wouldn't have passed, right? So non-certified people very often pass it just fine. And also, I think certification proves that you know a lot of the ins and outs of FileMaker. It can't certify that you use it intelligently. So you can be certified and still do some pretty numbskull things, right? I'm sure I still do.
Well, I think we all do.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, uncertified developers aren't necessarily worse, and certified developers aren't necessarily better. It's just kind of a baseline. It just kind of proves I know this much, you know. Eliminates some questions. Prospective clients who are like, well, how long have you been working with this? Can you show me some examples of your work? I'm not sure you really know what you're talking about. You know, you put that certified on your business card or whatever, it says, well, at least FileMaker says I know their. Now let's talk about whether I actually know what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel the same way about a college degree. I mean, I took 11 years to get a 4-year degree. Because work kept getting in the way, and same way about a college degree, like bothering. But you know, once you've got it, you can lay that down and go, look, I know this baseline of stuff. Now we can talk about specifics, and we don't have to keep, you know, trying to vet each other. So
I got to give you credit. 11 years for a four-year college degree. That's like, I'm impressed that you kept at it that long.
That's one way of looking at it. That's a very generous way to look at that. Thank you. It also means that I couldn't on a major or a school. But no, a lot of it was that I was in business and working. It's hard to actually get the degree to prove what I was doing all day long. So, and I expect it's the same way with a lot of FileMaker developers. I mean, if you're too busy working in FileMaker that you know how to work in FileMaker. Like, what? You know, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy actually doing it. Well, anyway, I think that's about our time. Unless anybody has anything last minute they want to throw in? I hear crickets. Sounds done. And look forward to hanging out next time. Again, we'll I think our topic as it stands right now is news from DevCon. So I'm going to try and come back with some techniques and experiences that I can share with you guys. And by all means, if anybody has any ideas for other topics or even wants to present in an upcoming FMPUG, we'd certainly like to hear from you, get your input, or even better, get you to take the mic. So communicate with us. And other than that, if nobody has anything else, we'll talk to you next month, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
Everybody.